slowly but surely, I ended up, I ran kind of a traditional demand gen or inbound, using marketing and Marketo and HubSpot and doing the whole MQL, SQL, scoring and all of that. I ran that for a while. And I think that for me, moving into more of kind of the content marketing space, the thought leadership space, and the intersection that has now in my current role with product marketing, it's always been getting closer to the humans behind the screen. And that's, I think, where for me, I would not necessarily call myself a content marketer, even though I a lot of the deliverables and a lot of the things I measured on align with what that looks like today. But I tend to have a much broader mindset around how to distribute it, how to do research, where it intersects with the other disciplines within marketing. And so I would consider myself more of an integrated marketer who happens to have kind of some depth. If you're familiar with the T-shaped professional, totally. I would probably say yes, I've kind of started to build that T-shape in the content space and kind of social media content. But I kind of like to go across and make sure I don't get too far away from email or, product marketing or even inbound. I've obviously changed my mindset a lot over the last decade or so on how that should work. I tend to be team ungate everything and let people raise their hand when they're ready to buy. But I kind of ended up in this career just because it was okay, the mix of skills and being as close to the humans behind the screen as possible, this tends to be a great way for me to do that.
What else have you changed your mind about in inbound marketing?
Oh man, we could go on a whole rant about this. So first of all, the ungating. So I, in the past, have used gated strategies and definitely kind of followed that. I firmly believe and have always believed two things. One, I never want to sell anything to anybody. I want to match problems with solutions, because if I convince you to buy something that you don't need or that doesn't actually solve your problem, that's bad for me because you're going to be a very expensive customer for me to support. And it's bad for you because you don't actually solve your problem. And so you go out and tell everyone that my product or service is bad. Mm-hmm. The second thing is we're not tricking anyone into buying anything. And so that sense that you need to sell them. And I'm like, you want me to trick someone into buying something? No, I need to communicate in a way that explains the problems I solve with a deep understanding of the problems that they have and make sure there's a good fit. And then I need to explain that in a way that shows them that I have the solution to their problem, not convinces them that they have a problem in the first place, not convinces them that I can solve their problem. No, they have a problem. I need to help them understand it if they don't already. I may or may not have a solution. If I do, I need to help them understand the solution. And so it sounds like kind of pedantic. It's kind of the same thing. You're selling them products and services. But when you approach it like that, you lose out on that long-term relationship, on turning someone into a brand champion, on long-term recurring revenue. Again, coming from a SaaS perspective these days, I have to keep winning and re-winning the hearts and minds of my audience. And so I think the mindset shift that I've had as well, going from ungated, I used to think I won. I sold you a thing, I won. Haha, I have closed the deal. And now I understand, actually, that's just the first start of the relationship. And there's so many different ways to get value besides the linear journey that ends in a purchase. It's not ending. It's an ongoing relationship. Careers are long. People go to different companies. Do they bring you with them or do they not? We need to hire people. Are you hiring customers, getting referrals from those people? We create strategic partnerships so that we can expand into new markets. Do you have a good reputation with these people that you've, kind of browbeaten into buying something? Probably not. And so I think that's been the biggest shift for me, is that I no longer think that my goal is to convince someone to buy something and then I did my job. It goes beyond that.
I generally think audiences are smarter than we give them credit for. And I don't think we treat them that way oftentimes, especially in content. So I think you may have mentioned something like this in a past interview that I was listening to, but there's some tone that I hear in especially marketing content written for other marketers, where it's almost insultative. It's hey, you're terrible at email marketing. Here's how you should do it. And they'll use subject or headlines like that. Your content sucks. Here's how to fix it. And it's like, my content doesn't suck. Like that's pretty aggressive language. Or just like the constant breathless like demand that like you're missing the most important piece of the puzzle. It's like, if you're not doing this, your business is going to fail. Like that kind of language, I just feel like breeds a certain amount of distrust for me at this point. I don't know. It's like, it's like over the top.
Yeah. It's so funny because if I quippily have a soundbite, it's, things like the funnel is dead, use a playground instead, right? Like that's the quippy soundbite. But the reality is that it's also nuanced. And so that's why I hesitate to say 100% you should ungate everything. I don't know why anybody's doing that. No, there is a place for this content. And depending on what your goals are, depending on who your audience is, depending on the maturity of the industry, the maturity of the product, the maturity of the organization, like there's so many things. And so obviously it's no fun to have a conversation with somebody who just says it depends to every single question. Like at some point you got to take a position, at some point you got to stand by that position. But the further I get in my career, the more hard pressed I am to say, oh, I would never do this thing, or this thing is dead, right? Like even the other day, I just I posted this on LinkedIn talking about LinkedIn articles. So basically the very long form LinkedIn articles. And people have started coming to me and saying, oh, should I publish this as a LinkedIn article? And my gut reaction is like, no, LinkedIn articles tank. They're useless. And then I took a step back. I'm like, okay, to be fair, I haven't actually tested that in about 2 years because I had a bad experience with it. And I started to notice that it was tanking. So I was like, well, screw that. I'm not going to do that. But I've gotten this question now 5 times. So somebody thinks it's working. Let me ask around. And so I started asking around to some other people. I'm like, hey, are you using this? Is it being successful for you? And several of them were like, actually, no, but it's funny. It's coming up. Am I missing something? Is it dead? Ashley, you should do an experiment. And I'm like, all right, I'll do an experiment. Right. And then I talked to one person, Steve Watt, actually, and he pushed back and he's like, I think articles are actually measured differently than the feed. And so we're comparing apples to oranges. So he's like, my gut says that you're right, that they're dead, quote unquote, they're useless. But what if we're measuring them wrong? And so he and I both did an experiment. We both looked at the results and then we got on a live stream and nerded out. And I was like, all right, I'm still not ready to tell people that like, you need to go all in on LinkedIn articles, but I need to take a step back from my gut reaction of all caps. Oh my gosh, no, this is stupid. Don't do it. And so I've had enough of those things over my career. And to your point, it's like, actually, no, my content doesn't suck. Like, actually, no, I'm not missing a whole piece of the puzzle. Thank you very much. I would say that if you get a marketer who just steadfastly is like, it is this way and this is the only right way,
they're trying to sell you something.
They are either arrogant or they're missing some information. That is the one ground I will kind of drive a stake into, that like, actually, no, there's very few hills that I will die on because the hills change.
You do see people like very like carrying, like holding on to this whatever like ideology they've kind of bought into, and like there's no other room for nuance. I think intellectually honest people at some point are almost always going to say it depends, but I've also learned from doing these podcasts and from doing panels in the past. And my friend Justin Rondo told me this. He's like, it depends is useless when you're on stage. Like, because what people are going to hear is not, oh, this is a nuanced issue, and like I have to learn and do the data analysis and experimentation myself. It just glosses over. So in those situations, I've learned to be like contrarian, bold, throw the thing out there. But then like if somebody asks me after the show or after the panel's over, be like, well, I've seen it go this way and I've seen it go that way.
Let's talk about. Well, I don't know if you've experienced this, talking about kind of the ocean framework and being, high on openness and high on extroversion. I have a lot of energy. I tend to talk very loud. I tend to talk very fast. Like I can take up a lot of space and I can talk with a lot of confidence. And that is great. But if I'm not careful, people will basically take that as like, oh, this is what we're doing. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I was just giving an opinion, or I was just saying what I've seen in my experience, right? So it's funny because I'm with you on that I don't want to be mealy mouthed on stage. Like I don't want to stand up there and be, well, you can, wait, if you could, no, but people came here to get an answer to their question, but I have to be careful to kind of caveat, this is the context that I bring to this example or to this mindset. And so if you're not in this same context, here's some other things that you might need to consider. And I actually think that builds trust, even if I promptly say, like, I'm coming at it from this context, so all the caveats, now I will go forth and talk. Just the fact that I recognize that I'm coming from one specific perspective and context, I think that helps to be able to balance, like, well, Ashley said this. I'm like, okay, but I said this in this exact context, not in whatever your 180-degree different context is.
It's not just that, though, because this is so funny. I've never heard anybody else say it like this, but I resonate so strongly. Like, I'll have things where I'm 35 to 60% sure I'm right. Like, it's some varying degree of probability that what I'm saying is actually accurate. And in my mind, I know that, like, but I'll say it out loud in this, like, very affirmative, very strong way. So then friends of mine will be like, well, you said this. And I was like, I didn't know. I was just talking out loud. I was just thinking, So I've learned to start putting parameters for my own uncertainty on conversations, even just with friends. Be like, I think I heard this somewhere. I'm like 35% sure. We'll look it up, but